This week, we welcome John Elliott to the show. John is known for inventing and manufacturing dehumidifiers, which suits the UK climate. This snowballed into a large and successful business, Ebac, which provides manufacturing jobs in a deprived area of the north of England. In getting where he is today, we discuss him leaving school at 15, growing up without a father, and the fear of failure, and the entrepreneurial gene. All of this that makes him unique. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for agreeing to do this podcast with me. I'm really quite excited to hear your story because it's not very often that you get a chance to talk to someone that's had a pretty similar background to yourself, and I'll be able to tell you a bit about mine as we're sort of talking. Now, the theme of this podcast series is about success is not normal. And it's really to try and give an insight to people who want to be successful, who want to be an entrepreneur, to really to give them advice about what it takes. So what will be very useful for me then, John, is if you could take us all the way back to the beginning about where you were born and give me a bit about your background.
I think the answer is very simple, actually. You've got to be born with that gene, so you haven't got a choice in the matter. So that's... You're going to be or you're not going to be. You need the right environment to be able to flourish. But the way we are is the way we are, and we don't change. We get older and wiser, but our basic traits don't change.
So do you have brothers and sisters then, John?
I've got two brothers. And
would you say they have the same gene, or would you say they don't?
No, they don't. I'm just lucky, if that's the right word. I'm not sure it's lucky either, actually, but sometimes I think people that don't worry about anything and get by. There's lots of talk now about mental health. I actually think that comes with the territory. If you're ambitious or you're a really caring person, you'll have bad days. And that's why you have good days, because the bad days are bad. And I think people who are very, very relaxed and not very ambitious don't have much problem with mental health.
And so because I'm trying to take you up on this theory that actually entrepreneurialism is genetic, and you've got two brothers and they're not as entrepreneurial. Where are you in that family? Are the eldest, the youngest?
In the middle.
You're in the...
I think every gene that you and I have got came from our parents, but they don't always come out in the same ratio. But that's why children aren't identical. Identical twins are, but otherwise, it's a different set of genes. I think if it's two handfuls of genes mixed together, and each time the handful's different. And it's strange, the combination. What amazes me is that I used to have ginger hair. My mother didn't, but my grandmother did. My children didn't, but their children did. So it seems to jump a generation. And those genes come from me and my wife. So it isn't absolutely regular.
So what I'm trying to figure out then is that when you were younger, when you were a kid, for example, did you know you were different to everybody else?
Well, I don't know what it's like to be anyone else. See, that's what I struggle with. When people say they feel like a woman, I don't know what that means, because I only know how I feel, and I know other people won't feel the same way. So,
but how did your parents or your friends, how did they see you? Did you fit in? Did you belong, or were you your own minded person?
I almost lack confidence, actually, and even the degree of shyness, which people can't believe, but it's still true, actually. And I think shy people are careful to get the right words, and therefore they seem to be articulate and confident because they're shy. That's it. Life's full of contradictions. My father died when I was 6 months old. Now, apparently, statistically, lots of successful people, and I don't think I'm that successful either, by the way. I think I've underperformed, in fact, tend to have lost the father in early life. So whether that makes you, I don't know whether that makes you more determined. I think if you have difficulties, make you better. If you survive difficulties, you're stronger. They don't kill you, you make you stronger. We've just gone through a difficult time trading-wise with the pandemic. But generally speaking, the team is stronger, even though we've had difficulties, which we've dealt with. I think we need that, actually. Some people call it tough love. I think if everything's too easy, we're not as good. But I'm using the word good as well. You know, it's a bit subjective. So I don't think people who are not ambitious, not entrepreneurs, not inferior. They're just different.
Mm. And so if you go back, what intrigues me is that you said that you could remember being shy, because I suppose when somebody... Pardon?
I still am shy fundamentally, although I'm more confident now because things don't matter so much.
But you see, because I'm trying to work out what that solution is. So to be shy and to put yourself out there is pretty remarkable, isn't it? Because what most shy people do is that they shut themselves away, don't they?
Well, and that sometimes I do. I remember going somewhere, and even though I was supposed to call on the stage, I hid away and I kept quiet and hoped no one would see me. That's a long time ago, that actually. But I think people are fascinating, and we're all different. And what will be, will be. We've got now the genes we've got. I don't think we've got any free will, which is rather sad to think about that. But and what will be, will be. But you need the environment. If you're talented and you're in a country with a poor economy, you won't do very well, or you might have different skills to thrive there. So it depends on the environment you're in, whether you succeed or not.
Mm. Well, let me just tell you a bit about my story, because I was born in Jamaica and I came to this country. I'm part of the Windrush generation, and I came over to join my parents when I was 5 years old, and we were brought up in a place called Small Heath in Birmingham. Now, Small Heath in Birmingham is one of those classic inner city areas it's a bit of a dump. And I can remember that it was a very, very, very poor environment to be brought up in. There's 11 of us in my family, and we lived in a terrace house, and you could imagine how cramped that was. And I can remember it was about when I was 11 years old, and because my father had an allotment, I decided that one day I'd like to own my own farm. So there was a moment I can remember that triggered me to say, well, this was going to be the course I was going to take with my life and not be like anyone else. And so that's what I'm trying to find out. Was there anything like that happened in your case?
I think, interesting, 11 people in one house, and people now talk about, difficult conditions. I lived in a house where there was 6 of us with 2 bedrooms, a terrace house in a mining village, because my father died. My mother then moved in with her parents, and there was 4 of us. So we lived in, and it wasn't a problem. We didn't have any central heating. No one died of hypothermia. Getting to bed was a bit of a tricky job at times in the cold weather and getting out. But I think those things make us better people, you see. I think we look now for everybody to be comfortable and secure. And we need risk and threats and difficulties to overcome. It's just part of life.
What I think we say is that, well, some people use those challenges and it actually prepares them for, in a sense, what you've actually achieved. But some people, those sort of experience makes them contract.
I'm not sure. Well, maybe, but then that's what it's going to be. I never thought I want to be a successful businessman. But I like planning, and I like organising. I like to win. So I'm more interested in the process rather than the end goal. In fact, I've been in business for 50 years, and I've just realised, my daughter does some analysis of people. She talks to them and finds out what your trends are. And my trend is not that I want to succeed, but I fear failure. Now, that could be part of not having a father and having free school meals, which was rather embarrassing for me. And I think that's reasonable, to be embarrassed by having free school meals, because most people didn't have free school meals. And so that made it motivate me more not to lose. So when we do well, in Ebac business, we've had some very successful times. But when we get stressed, I relax, because my incentive is not to fail. So as soon as I'm winning, I cut back and then start losing again. And what I found is actually, you've got to understand your traits and deal with them. Don't think you can change them. I'm not a very good manager. So I employ people who are good managers. And that's someone who, the determination is to get it completed, good or bad. That's the sort of person who's a good manager. Now, an entrepreneur is someone who thinks of options and never finishes anything, because you're always so open-minded that you're getting new ideas in. That's what you're doing. People who are focused totally cut off any new ideas, so they don't see them. And I think, and we're all a bit of both of those things, of course, but some are more extreme than the others. And we can change if the circumstances change. Sometimes I do get things finished. It's quite rare, because usually when I'm halfway through a job, I start another one. Or I'm thinking of, is there a better way to do it? So I think you've got to understand yourself and accept your weaknesses. Don't try and correct them, accept them and deal with them.
And so going back to that then, what would you say are your strengths and what are your weaknesses?
I'm a very bad organizer. I'm not well organized. I'm not a good process person. I can't stick, I move around too much. I'm very open-minded, but that's a strength. And people's strength is also the weakness. If you're very good at being open-minded, you're very poor at being focused. And if you're very good at being focused, you're very poor at being, so they go with it, and they change with the circumstances. As I said, I do get some things finished, but it's got to be fairly important to do that for me to do it. It's got to be desperate. So I think we are what we are. Understand yourself and accept your strengths and work on them rather than worry about your weaknesses. Deal with your weaknesses. Don't expect to change them.
The other thing that I'm quite fascinated with is that what is it that you had in you? So here you are, a kid that's brought up in pretty desperate situations or poor situations. You don't have a father around.
We actually thought council houses were good. We looked up to council houses. People talk about coming up in a council estate. We looked up to those. They actually had a bath in that, which we didn't. So it's amazing when people talk about being in a council house as a poor thing. We used to look up to that as progress.
And so what's amazing then for me is that, well, how does someone from that sort of background then have the courage, because it's a pretty courageous thing, to go out and decide you're going to do something on your own? Explain, how does that work?
Because I'm not a risk taker, but I take calculated risks. I had a decent job. My mother always insisted, but I left school at 15, and she insisted, you've got to get a trade. There's two options actually in the Northeast when I left school, which is in 1959 or thereabouts. Half the people went down the mines, and the other half worked in factories. That was generally the trend. Working down the mine was better paid. But mother said, you've got to get a trade. And she insisted I became an apprentice. And insisted that I stuck in classroom work and stuck in at work. If I went home and complained about someone at work giving me a hard time, her response would be, you probably deserved it. Never got any sympathy, very strict, very caring, and a good mother, but never, always pushed us to don't think you're being badly treated. You've got to stick in, you've got to just get your head down, you've got to work. There's no easy answer.
So your mom insisted that you had to get a trade, and what was that trade?
I was an apprentice electrical engineer. I left school at 15. An interesting story, this. And then I'd never done 1 minute's homework because I hadn't been asked to. I sat one examination and failed it, 11 plus. So school was different then to now. Schools are now totally focused on examination results, and I think that's wrong. I think life skills. The school I went to, it is a small village, 70 houses. There was four people in my age group. And between 5 and 11, there was 2 classrooms. And we didn't do a lot of work, I don't think. I mean, we must have learned to read and write and do things, but wasn't very focused. Certainly wasn't examinations. And I think now there's so much pressure on kids to pass examinations, which in my opinion, don't tell you very much. You can pass an examination without understanding a subject. If you've got a good memory and you learn to pass examinations, and that's what they do now. They train people to pass examinations, which I think is the wrong thing to train people. If I was running education, in fact, I wouldn't have education, I'd have child development. And it would start from birth to adulthood. And it would look for each person, depending on their circumstances, as different needs. And education is only part of that. Education is only part of that.
So in those days, if you failed your 11 plus, you then went to the technical schools then, is that right?
No, it wasn't even that. It wasn't even that. It was Top Hill County Mixed. It wasn't even, there were secondary moderns, they were called, actually.
I went to a secondary modern. So
I didn't have that choice. I didn't have that choice. There were, because it's a very rural area, Southwest Durham, and lots of pit villages, or quite a few pit villages. And I went to Top Hill School, which was 4 classrooms. It was pretty good. It was more strict than the earlier school, which was quite laid back. I don't think the education system plays a big part in our lives, especially now, actually, because if you want to learn now, you can learn anytime you want with the internet. You know, you've got to, in fact, I think you've got to need, learning is about learning, not about teaching. I've got to want to learn. You can't teach me if I don't want to learn. So it's giving people the right environment to learn. And
so in your case, then you learnt how your skills. Was that actually doing an apprenticeship, physically working on the job?
The apprenticeship was you went to college 1 day a week and one night, and I did electrical engineering, which was what I was doing at work. Whereas I think when people go to university, they do something and they don't end up doing that job anyway. It's not appropriate. I don't think you should go to university until you've got a job or you know, I think education's part of life rather than a separate part of life. Important. It's important that we learn, and it's important that we learn from others, otherwise we'll make no progress. But I think it's got to be something that's appropriate.
Okay, so you go and do that. You do your apprenticeship. Yep. So that's basically, you have a job.
Yes.
What then happens after that?
Well, then when I was 21, which was 6 years, I left at slightly 15, I came out my apprenticeship at 21, and I became a junior draftsman. So I progressed through the business into the drawing office where we did design work. It went to different departments, doing all kinds of things. Some of them simple labouring, actually, just doing simple tasks. But you're getting experience. You know, a phrase I've heard, this might appeal to you, the best fertiliser is the farmer's feet.
That's right? A fantastic saying, actually, isn't
Walking
it?
around the farm, you'll learn more than any report or anything else. You'll see things that other people don't see, and from experience, and a desire to succeed. And I think it's just doing things at a low level. Same as when Ebac started. It took us 7 years to do £1 million turnover. But in that time, I'd done everything. I'd done the payroll, I'd done the accounts, I did the sales, did the purchasing, I did the production. Once you get into a bigger business, they can't afford you to do that. It's too risky. When you're a small business, if you make a mistake, you work the weekend and sort it out. If you're running GEC, you can't do that if you make a mistake. It's too big. So I think getting in a small and spending 4 or 5 or 6 years in a small business growing, you just get a lot of experience. And it's there forever.
And so you went off to work and then as a draftsman. Then right. What happened?
Then I that was 21. Then I was 23. I got married, and I moved to London actually. And
well, tell me about that. I want you to tell me, how did you meet your wife? Then was she from that part of the world?
She worked in the same factory that I did. Yeah.
So you got married, and again, so how old would you have been in those days?
I was 23.
23. So that's well, in today's standards, that's quite young.
Margaret was 10. Only joking.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Margaret was only 18 actually. So it's better age difference. So I suppose I was always confident enough that I could try things, and I would always make a living. So we moved to London. I worked in a company in Latimer Road. And I was only there for about maybe 6 months. Then I got a job at the Science Research Council near Abingdon. That's the Rutherford High Energy Laboratory, where they do protons around the circuit to try and understand atomic structures. And I worked on there for about 1.5 years on the vacuum systems. Very interesting place to work, actually, because I'm always fascinated how things work. I need to know how they work my way. I don't need to I don't want to repeat the formula. I want to understand it my way. I'm always questioning things. Wonder why that happens. Whereas most of us, and me as well, I suppose, take things for granted. And if you think about it, that's why we resist change. If we, on a daily basis, we were questioning everything we did, we'd go crazy, wouldn't we? You know, am I in the right job? Am I married to the right person? Am I living in the right place? If all of those things were debatable, you would go bonkers. So it's human nature to accept the status quo and even defend it, actually, because we all defend the status quo. Why it's better to be British than German, or why it's better to be Roman Catholic than a Protestant. It's just because that's our instinct, and it keeps us sane. I think if everything was negotiable, we'd go crazy. Is it the right religion? Is it, you know? So that's a human trait, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. So therefore, you went on and did that because all of those, what I call your standard doing a job.
Yes. No, then I went back to the company I used to work as a designer in sales. Mm-hmm. And again, because of my inquiring mind, I found out we used to sell dehumidifiers for drying timber. I learned more about I don't take anything for granted, so I had to work out what's going on here, and I figured out a better way of doing it, and that still applies now. In the last couple of years, at Ebac, we've developed a heat pump, which is the up-and-coming heating system, of the future. I'm not sure you're aware of heat pumps. There's mixed views on them, but I've got no doubt at all it's the heating system of the future because it's very energy efficient. And a lot of big people make these, people like Bosch, Mitsubishi, and yet the heat pump that we've developed is the most energy efficient heat pump in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
Now, isn't that amazing? These big organizations with these big structures, that's the benefit of being innovative, you see, and not in a controlled fashion, thinking outside the box and going off on tangents. Big businesses don't like that. So that's why a smaller business can actually... Our washing machine is rated by Which to the most energy efficient of all they've ever tested. Every washing machine which tested consumes more energy than ours.
Yeah, isn't that really interesting? So you go back to your original country as sales, and then what?
Can I just say something on Which as well? But Which have acknowledged that ours is the most energy efficient, but they say you shouldn't buy it.
Why is that then?
Because in their opinion, it doesn't wash well enough. Because their test is totally inappropriate to what people do on a day-to-day basis. Their test is very strict, and you've got to they put in 5 different stains in a controlled fashion, and you've got to reduce those stains because you can't remove them. And therefore, you've got to overwash to do that. Where we design a machine to deal with normal washing. Most other companies design a machine to get a Which Best Buy.
Okay.
Which means it overwashes. It's not, so it's just... But Which, this big institution, will not accept it. I've talked to them many times and just rejected. We've sold 20,000 washing machines. I can't think of one complaint of not washing. And yet Which won't talk to us. They said, we're not going to talk anymore. We're quite happy that our tests are correct. Unbelievable. An institution like Which are prepared for their own benefit to actually not give customers the best advice. Isn't that irritating?
Well, it is what happens when...
That's a digression. It's irrelevant to the conversation. Sorry about that.
No, but it's really interesting for me because it's always about these big institutions that have power, and therefore they tend to be behind the curve with innovators like yourself. Is that they're operating by old rules, and that the new rules that you're working to, they haven't caught up with that, really. And I think that's one of the great frustrations.
Which is, see, most of the institutions in the UK or in the Western world are not very good. Our legal system isn't very good. It isn't focused on justice. It's focused on a process that only the lawyers understand. And it's a complicated game that they play very well, and Which can defend their situation. I've talked to a lawyer who said, can we not take them to court? He said, you'll lose. Because the legal law will say, they tell you how they do their test, and these are the results. So they haven't done anything wrong. But people don't look at it.
You're a man after my own heart, really, because one of my great frustrations in life is what I call the fearmongers. And the fearmongers tend to be accountants and solicitors. And actually, they make a fortune of either instilling fear and using a language that is unnecessary, because business fundamentally comes down to trust. Eventually, you've got to go with your gut, and you've got to trust that actually it's the right sort of thing. You know, if you try and protect yourself from every eventuality, you could go crazy. The
legal system is based around a game played by the legal profession, and they do very, very well. I mean, an average lawyer will cost you £300 an hour.
Yeah.
You know, and yet a good designer will cost you a lot less, you know, and they don't add any value. I mean, if you need a legal system, I'm not saying that. But it just seems to be the legal system is inappropriate. Half the lawyers are trying to get guilty people off, and the other half are trying to get innocent people punished.
Yeah, I just think that's quite interesting.
And they probably know that. Anyway,
but one of the things I'm quite interested in then, so when did you decide I'm going to go out on my own? Because that for me is a great leap of faith.
That was when I was 28. So I'm married at 23, had 2 or 3 different jobs, went back to the original company in sales, and I decided to leave there and actually work as a freelance salesman. Now, I had 2 children, not really much money, and I was prepared to try it, but I always work out, if it fails, can I take the risk? And I never play Russian roulette. Because if the barrel that's at your head's got a bullet in it, you're 100% dead. You're not 10% dead, you're 100% dead. So, and I always felt I could earn a living. if it didn't work. And it's surprising how little you can live on, actually. It really is surprising how little you can live on. It's not ideal, but you can get by if you need to. And so I did that. I knew some people.
Yeah, but what I'm interested in is this, because it's about.
Sorry, then I met a person by chance who wanted to buy a dehumidifier for drying buildings. And I was just a freelance salesman then. And I said, I could design a dehumidifier for drying buildings, and it'll be the best there is. I did that, and that's when Ebac started. There was no plan to do it. I met a guy by chance. I really did this in the back of a fag packet. And it was different any other building dryer then. Difference was, as well as being a dehumidifier, a building dryer takes out moisture. I could use it with a small adaptation to be portable cooler as well.
But the thing I'm interested in is the way you explain it. You explain it as though it's easy, but it isn't.
Well, it is if you can. It's easy if you can do it. It's
not. No, let me tell you what I mean by this. Is that?
Oh, you're right. No, it's not easy. You're right.
Yeah. I just think, look, you've got a family, you've got 2 kids, you got wife, you've got responsibilities. A lot of people faced with that situation will contract. They will go for what they perceive to be the safe option. You have a sense of belief and confidence in self that you're prepared to go out and give it a try. That is what I'm interested in. Do you see what I mean?
I agree. Without knowing where it was going to go, but always believing that I can live with the downside. That's my risk assessment. People think I take risks. I don't. I make decisions which are risky, but I can always deal with the downside.
And so what would have been the downside in that when you were starting off, for example?
Well, if I didn't earn any money in, say, 3 months, maybe 2 months, I can't read this a long time ago, I'll have to get a job. But I always felt I could get a job.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what's really interesting then from what you're saying is that there has to be an inner core of confidence and belief that whatever happens, you'll be able to be all right.
But most people could do that. Most people in work today, if they tried a different job and it didn't work out, they wouldn't need to starve. They could get another job again, assuming they've got some worth. And all people have got some worth, haven't they? I mean, everyone's got something they can do, but people are just cautious, and that's just.
Well, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah,
you see,
the instincts. Sorry,
carry on. Yeah,
the instincts we've got, I think they came from we've already agreed that our genes came from our parents. Our 2 parents give us our genes. Nobody else, just them. And and part of those genes is instincts. And the instincts are from way back. Lots of things what I call open-ended. If you take when a crow lays an egg, when a crow builds a nest, he doesn't think, I better build a nest, I'm going to lay an egg. There's no concept it's going to blow it. And it's not going to think sitting on the egg is going to build a chick. It's all instinctive. Somehow it wants to fiddle with twigs. It gets something out of fiddling with twigs to make a nest. And then when it mates with its partner, and then it lays an egg in the nest, and then it sits on it. It doesn't think I'll sit on this to create a chick. Everything is open-ended. We've got instincts. And for example, humans, one of our instincts is greed. Now, that's a very negative word, but greed to me means we like more than we need. And that was essential 6,000 years ago to survive. If you didn't have that gene then, people who didn't have that gene then died out. So that we left with all those instincts that were appropriate then, but unfortunately aren't necessarily appropriate now.
So therefore, what we're saying, if we're going with the argument that it's about genes, basically, what that tells me is that it's very few people who have the right genes in order to be entrepreneurial. So if you then take the scenario that you painted a moment ago, where somebody said to you, where can I get this machine made? And your instinct was to say, yes, I can. Most people would have said, well, go and try so-and-so. They wouldn't have said, actually, I could do it. That is what's remarkable.
But that instinct I'm born with, you see. If you think, what's the great golfer, the American golfer that was top of the list for Tiger Woods?
Yeah.
Right? Now, isn't it amazing that of all of the million people playing golf, he was the best of all of them by a long way? Wouldn't you think there would have been 50 as good as him? So to have the uniqueness of all of us, and if you've got that extra something that makes you play good at golf or be good at business, you're in a small number,
Yeah, but what I think is that if you take Tiger Woods as your example, he would never ever have been as good as he turned out to be if he didn't train. And so there
His
must
genes. His genes. He enjoyed training, or he had the desire to. He felt the desire to. Some instinct inside him made him do that. He didn't tell himself to do it. It came from within. So that desire, it came from his parents.
So let me follow that theme. How old are you now then?
I'm only 78. I'm actually 79 this month.
79.
I'm starting to worry now. I'm getting near 80. You know, that's quite old.
No, but the reason I ask you that is that you're driven and you're as passionate as a young man. So that's what's quite fascinating. You know, people when they get to their 60s, they're thinking about slowing down, and being retired.
I'm thinking of slowing down.
Yeah, but everything about you is still as a man with ideas.
I can't help you. I've got no choice I've got no choice.
And you've always been like that. Then you've always been this sort of person that has a positive aura about things. Would you say?
That sounds very posh, but I suppose it is. I don't think I've done very well, actually. I think I've underperformed.
Do you? What makes you think that?
In fact, no. I've got no doubt about it.
But so why do you think that you've underperformed?
I've underperformed. Ebac's been around for 50 years with lots of good talents, not more than me. And yet we're still the size we more or less are. But I think we are going to grow significantly, actually, now. That excites me, this, because of this heat pump we've developed. I think this is going to make the business 3 or 4 times bigger than it is now, and more successful, profitable-wise.
And so if you look back then, so you're 78 and you look back, so what is it you would have done differently now that you could look back?
I probably would have been, I've always resisted, when you had a business 50 years with some quite good successes and some quite good failures as well, people always wanted to buy the business. And I've always resisted that. And in fact, the business was put into a trust, an employee's trust, so that it would be not owned by me. Because I think there are more stakeholders in the business than the people who've got the shares. Maybe I should have, before that, maybe I should have been more ambitious and brought investment in and expanded more. Maybe it could have been 10 times bigger, creating more wealth for the country. Because I think manufacturing, and I include farming and manufacturing, by the way, is what we've got to get more of in the UK. It's that simple. We consume more than we produce. We pay ourselves more than we earn. Collectively, I'm talking about, not some individuals. There's too many people can earn or can receive cash without delivering anything. All of us consume, but only a few of us produce that consume itself, and we don't consume enough, and we make it up by bringing it in from overseas, which we pay for with debt.
And so, actually, then if you go back to the thing about getting an investment, if you got an investment, you then lose control.
No, I'm not worried about that. That doesn't worry me one little bit. If I deserve to lose control, I shouldn't control it. If someone can do it better than me, and I'm sure there is, I'm quite relaxed about that. Something I've noticed about me as well, I'm happier if people in my team do well than I do well. I've just noticed that recently, actually, that I get more excited about people in the team fulfilling their potential than me. And that's, again, I'm not claiming any credit, that's just a gene I've got. Like the crow laying the eggs, I can't help it.
And can you spot that entrepreneurial gene in people? Yes. It's not always easy, because us humans play games, don't we? We do. We always say we've had a good holiday and our relationship is fantastic and everything. We say what we think is appropriate rather than what's true. So it's difficult to see people. And actions speak louder than words. It's what people do, not what they say. That's why I try and differentiate between as well. People sometimes say fantastic things, but what do they do? You've got to separate those two things. And some people are pretty persuasive. It's tricky, and people are complicated. And so what is the attributes you think are for a person to be entrepreneurial? What are the skills they need? You've got no choice in the matter. You've got to have an open mind. You've got to be a free thinker. You've got to be poor at being focused. That's almost as important. I think a manager, has got to be someone who is determined to do something.
right? And again, on these analysis that my daughter does, which found out that I was someone who didn't like to lose, there are people who take information as instructions and people who take instructions as information. Now, what I mean by that is, if you say to someone who, I'm thinking about taking this wall down, and you walk away, the wall's down. So they take information as instructions. The other sort of person is say, I want to take this wall down, and they come up with 10 reasons why you shouldn't do it. Because they take instructions, and I want you to take the wall down. They tell you why you shouldn't do it. And that's not ranking people. It's just the way they are. They've got no choice.
That's a really interesting thing you just said. So it's different types of individuals.
So what you've got to do is you've got to find that strength. Draftsmen love going into fine detail, and they waste a lot of time embellishing drawings that you don't need to do. But you need that skill of being detailed. But then you've got to control it. So the strength is the weakness. They like doing tremendous detail, but they spend too long on it. So you've got to say, right, you've only allowed 3 hours to do it or whatever. You put a constraint on them. People who are determined to get things done don't worry about cost as much. Number one is to get it done. So you then got to put a constraint on them and say, you've got to do it for less than £3. So you've got to understand those traits and the strengths of the weaknesses, and you've got to deal with the weaknesses rather than think they're going to change and focus on the strengths. So it's identifying people's traits and communicating appropriately with them.
So, your children then, are any of your children entrepreneurial, would you say?
No.
And why is that?
Well, I didn't give them the right genes. My fault.
And so they've gone, say that again?
We can't help what we are.
Okay. And so, in terms of, do you think you can you could start off not being entrepreneurial and become an entrepreneur, or do you think you're definitely born with it?
No, I think you're born with it, but you need the right environment.
And when you say the right environment, what are we talking about?
The right commercial environment. If your skills are developing electric products, it wouldn't be very useful in a country that didn't have any electricity, would it? So it depends, the country you live in. Each country is different. They've got different opportunities. So if your particular skills match that environment, then you'll do well. If golf didn't exist, Tiger wouldn't have done as well, would he? So he needs that opportunity, because that's probably the thing he's good at. So the environment around you has got to suit that skill that you've got, that whatever that is. So if you're in an environment, I think the reason why countries like Afghanistan aren't very successful is because they don't have. Secret of economic success is large scale. I know that's not what we're in favour of, because we believe in small businesses. Doing things on a large scale. Imagine, instead of having 6 supermarkets in the UK, we had 10,000 corner shops. You wouldn't get the economies of scale, would you? You wouldn't get the choice we've got now. You wouldn't get the competitiveness. So you need economies of scale in farming. To get good production, you've got to have bigger tractors, better fertilizer, whatever. So that's what the countries that don't do very well, like Afghanistan, even though we've been there for 20 years, they haven't got any builders. We've got 6 big builders. If we only had 20,000 small builders, you wouldn't have the same economies of scale. You need economies of scale to get people to be wealthy. I mean, I'm talking about the population having wealth.
Exactly.
You've got to have these economies of scale.
So if you go back to this premise of this podcast about success is not normal, so we accept that your genes have made you entrepreneurial. What are the other attributes that make you abnormal?
Sadly, unfortunately, I think I'm not very abnormal, which is a bit of a disappointment.
No, but it's quite interesting there, because
I don't think I'm that exceptional either. Actually, I'm not cleverer than people. I've just got that thing.
But I think, John, the point is this.
It's a combination of things. It's a combination of being quite clever, open-minded, and be prepared to take risks.
Well, that's what I mean. I think the thing that you need. What I find quite interesting is that you think what you do is normal. Okay, to set up a company, to run a company that is still going for 50 years is not normal. It is not normal. So there's something different and exceptional about you. That you can't say, well, that's normal.
But I'm the only thing I know. So I don't know what I know. I've only been me. So
I know. So you're being.
I think this is normal. I think this is normal.
So you knowing you will see yourself as normal, but in reality, compared to everyone else, you are abnormal, because most people couldn't do it, or even though they tried, they failed at it. So the fact that you've been going for such a long time makes you abnormal.
Yeah,
and so therefore, so there's a drive, there is a confidence, there is something about you, which actually, if you could bottle it and people say, I want to be like him, you know, what are those things? So I accept the fact that you've got to have a genetic makeup.
It's all genetics, I'm afraid. It's all nature, not nurture. A little bit of nurture, but mainly nature. But you've got to have both, actually. You've got to have both. You've got to have the nature, those traits, like Tiger Wood, but you've got to have a game called golf as well.
Yeah, but one of the things I'm just wondering really is that, again, if you go back to your early background, which is, again, a struggle, was that struggle in a sense?
I didn't see it as a struggle, though. I thought it was normal. I didn't think it was a struggle. I never felt deprived. You know, the fact, I never felt deprived because that was normal. Okay,
so in your minds, it was normal, but in reality, compared to a lot of people, it is a humbling. Most people from that background go on to fail. They end up in prison. They end up on society's dustbin heap. There's got to be something different and unique about you.
I think they're a minority, mind. I think those are a minority, the people who totally fail.
I think it's a majority.
Majority totally fail?
Yeah, the majority totally fail.
I mean, you're a tough man.
But I just think it's the minority to come from your background to go, and a lot of people start businesses and businesses fail. You know, but yours has still been going. So it's those lessons that I'm really interested to sort of learn from, because, you know,
I think you've got to see, when things go wrong, you've got to get up and get on with it. You know, and there's always a solution. It amazes me, you know, you've got a problem, you get two people together, you discuss it, you find a solution, you can't believe you didn't think of it before. There's always a solution. So you've got to be able to deal with adversity. And I have sleepless nights, you know, but I think that comes with the territory.
But that's what I mean then. So what is it?
I don't say it's a negative, it's just part of life. If I'm down, things are going bad, and things often go bad at the same time, and it gets quite depressing. You just got to keep going.
So basically what you're saying then, really, and I would accept this, is that you have to have the capacity to be able to handle a lot of stress.
Definitely.
A lot of stress and anxiety.
Yes.
And a lot of people just don't have the makeup to handle stress and anxiety.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't even know me.
Okay, but what about the other thing I say to people is that it's how you manage fear, because there's no certainty.
Absolutely.
There's no certainty, but somehow you have to have faith that everything everything's going to work out.
Unbelievable things happen, don't they?
Well, they do. And if you go back to the first opportunity, you know, what was there in your mind when somebody says, "Do you know where I could get these from?" And you said, "I could do it." Now that's pretty courageous. That is, to be able to do that sort of stuff, really.
Probably, but I didn't see it like that. Just seemed normal.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much for this chat. But one of the interesting things what's come out for me about this is that actually you don't see yourself as exceptional. You're just getting on with it, and actually you see yourself as...
I'm disappointed in my performance.
You're disappointed?
Yeah, seriously. I'm not saying that. Seriously.
Yeah, well, I think
I'm going to perform better from now on. I really...
Okay. I think you're probably being a bit too harsh on yourself. And the reason why you're being too harsh on yourself, because you can't see that what you've already achieved is pretty remarkable and exceptional. It really is. And not only starting it, but still to be going 50 years on is a pretty remarkable feat. So, you know, you should give yourself a bit of slack, because it is remarkable. It's been really, really good.
I've enjoyed talking to you as well, actually. I really enjoyed it.
It's been really, really good. You have been listening to myself, Wilfred Emmanuel Jones, or better known as the Black Farmer. This was the Success is Not Normal podcast. Stay tuned for the next week's episode.